What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Tablesetters covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve. Join my tag partner, Dan. What's going on, man?
What's up? What's up? Welcome to Tablesetters, everybody. Thank you for listening. Steve, I'm going to start with a hard-hitting question like I like to often at the top of the show, non-baseball related, so get ready here. Give me your favorite Girl Scout cookie.
Wow. Favorite Girl Scout cookie has to be the Do-si-dos, which I believe is the peanut butter. Second with the Thin Mint, and I also am a sucker for the Samoas with the coconut, big coconut guy.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
You know someone's selling right now? Who's selling cookies by you?
Dude, so many people are selling. You just gotta know which corner to go to. Yeah, we already have our hands. We have a bunch of Thin Mints here, maybe a couple other boxes, but I'm a Thin Mints guy to my core. I just crushed some Thin Mints before the show. So if I'm looking a little sleepy, it's just I had a little bit too many. I went back. So I put them in the fridge. I like those cookies like a little colds. So I went back to the fridge 3 times. That tells you how many times, I was trying to put them away. Like just one more, just 2 more. And those things are the best, man. I really don't dabble in any other Girl Scout cookie. I'm just a Thin Mints guy. And I think they're like the worst things for you from what I've heard.
Well, Devin, we have a passing bomb to drop on here. Breaking news, the New York Mets have acquired all-star right-hander Freddy Peralta in a trade with the Milwaukee Brewers.
Goodness.
Deal is done. Top prospects Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat headed to Milwaukee.
Wow.
One more big league picture will head to the Mets once it's said and done. Your immediate reaction, Jeff Passan just dropped the bomb live on air.
Well, that's a first. That's a first here. So I'm trying to catch my bearings here. Listen, you and I just were chatting before we started the show, and we just quickly mentioned, what we're going to talk about and went over it. And you brought up the Freddy Peralta thing, and I kind of was like, yeah, last thing I heard is they wanted Tong. Mets said no. Then the Brewers wanted Sproat and Jet, and the Mets said no. And now suddenly we're getting this news, and that's why you never know these things that are out there, how much truth there is to it until you hear like from a guy like Jeff Passan. So initial reaction, I think it's expensive for 1 year. So my hope is that they feel like he's going to negotiate with them on an extension. Obviously, David Stern's very familiar with Peralta from his time in Milwaukee, so he very much knows what he's getting. I'm just thinking of when the Brewers traded Corbin Burns over to Baltimore a couple of years ago. They got Joey Ortiz and DL Hall. In a way, it's a similar return, if I'm being honest. A young pitcher, a young position player. DL Hall was a guy once highly touted. Has gone through some injuries, but when he's been out there, at times he's looked the part. Joey Ortiz mainly there for glove. The bat is but a glove guy. Similar here, Brandon Sproat. We've seen a little bit of him at the major league level. I actually did a big thread a few weeks ago how I not necessarily thought he was a reliever long term, but I thought because of the kind of overflow of starting pitchers the Mets have and some bullpen need, I think he would be great in the bullpen for a year or two. But I think he's going to be the real deal as well. I think it's a good get from Milwaukee, but at the same time, I mean, I was just talking today to some friends like, listen, I like what the Mets have done with the lineup. I know defense is a question. I just want them to go get a starting pitcher. And my guy was Fromber. They decide to go the prospect route. I mean, listen, I believe a top 100 prospects for Baseball America like just came out today or yesterday, and the Mets are tied up there, I believe, with the White Sox and one other team that is escaping me, maybe the Guardians, that have the most top 100 prospects, 6 of them, and that's not including Ryan Clifford, who is one of the guys just on the outside of the top 100. So they're using that capital. We talked about the Dodgers doing that frequently. And honestly, the Dodgers were the team rumored to be going to get Freddy Peralta as a few days ago. So the Mets swoop in here. I love it. I mean, it takes a little pressure off of Nolan McLean, not having to be the ace in his second year. Freddy Peralta can be that guy. Been there, done that. You got Nolan McLean behind him. Suddenly, one guy, and you look at that rotation, you're like, huh, not terrible.
Yeah, we've been discussing this offseason. It is an ebb and flow. We will talk about the Yankees offseason that they've kind of redirected now with Bellinger, but I think it's appropriate to get into the conversation from last night. And also, I dropped the emergency pod on Friday with Bo Bichette. If you guys missed it, Bichette did sign that 3-year, $126 million contract, and it represented the immediate pivot after missing out on Kyle Tucker. I believe everyone saw it was aggressive from the New York Mets. $42 million annual value, ties the sixth largest AAV in MLB history. It carries no deferrals, includes opt-outs after 2026 and 2027, comes with a full no trade clause. So as all the headlines have been saying, if Bichette opts out after the season, he adds a $5 million bonus and returns to the market still at just 28 years old, really without the burden of a qualifying offer. So the Mets are paying for present day certainty, not the projection in the future. And I discussed a lot about Bichette and what he brought to the table. And I do want to play it from his introductory press conference on here, but I want your initial reaction of the Bichette piece before we get into the Robert thing and kind of tie this piece together with now Freddy Peralta and how you feel about this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, things are coming together for the Mets. Quiet for a while. All they were doing for a little while is letting guys go. And it was a little frustrating because a lot of these guys were fan favorites. So the picture's starting to come into focus here. I'll try to take myself back to when the Bo Bichette thing first dropped to really say how I felt. I'm a big fan of Bo Bichette. Love what he brings to the table, especially offensively. One of the few guys that can be a 300 hitter nowadays. Was absolutely fantastic with runners in scoring position, runners on base last year. He showed in the World Series as well in the biggest moment, that home run off of Shohei Ohtani. He's got ice in his veins, even when he was hurt. So I was excited at the name, at a guy that I've kind of rooted for from afar, joining my team. That's always fun. And then my second thought was, wait a minute. Didn't we get Marcus Semien earlier in the offseason? Obviously, Francisco Lindor plays shortstop. So where is Bo playing? And then obviously it comes down to he's expected to play third base. Initially, I was worried about the arm, how the arm would go at third base. But the more I read up about it, the less I'm concerned about it. David Stearns talked today about how he's pretty confident with these guys that are playing out of position because a lot of them have a shortstop background, which typically, you have that background, you can adjust to other places. So I've kind of been talked into it a little bit. I mean, it's a wait and see. We've never seen him over there. So we'll see. But I think he might. I mean, he was a terrible shortstop analytically last year, like really, really bad, way in the negative with DRS and OAA, whichever one you want to look at, whichever one you prefer, way in the negative. So at third, it's more of kind of a reflex place, like a position on the field, less about, I mean, range still helps, but less about covering as much ground as shortstop. So it might actually be a good transition for him. So I'm excited. He's the kind of guy I feel like you could put anywhere in the lineup. And you look at this team now, for all this talk about clubhouse issues and maybe some immaturity and things like that, what David Stearns has done, and I've been one of the biggest critics. If you listen to this show, I didn't hold anything back on what I was feeling about David Stearns, but he has gone about this with clearly putting these kind of veteran professional baseball players on the field and in the clubhouse. Jorge Polanco, Bo Bichette, Marcus Semien, Freddy Peralta. To me, watching it from afar, they feel like they all kind of fit the same category of guys that just go out there and grind and do their job and love baseball. So I'm excited. The defensive thing is going to be interesting to watch with Bichette at third, with Polanco, some first base moving around the infield. Brett Beatty, who kind of earned a spot last year, now apparently moving around. Stearns said today that he wants him to play some left field in spring too, and kind of be a guy that can play almost every day, but in different spots and play a lot, get a lot of at bats. So it'll be interesting to see what the next part of his story is. I know when the Bichette signing went down, a lot of people were saying, all right, Beatty or Vientos are going to be traded for a pitcher. Turns out to be prospects. Jet Williams, Brandon Sproat. The good news is you still got Nolan McLean, young pitcher, stud. Jonah Tong stays. So it's not like, and there's other guys too that are less talked about coming up that a lot of Mets fans are very, very excited about. So it's not like, oh, suddenly the cupboard is bare. And so you use that strength, you go get something you need. Same thing with the Luis Robert thing, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So suddenly, in the matter of a few days here, in a matter of less than a week, if you're a Met fan, you got to be feeling pretty good.
Yeah, and the thing is, you mentioned the defense, and that has been the biggest conversation about this. The Mets appear willing to accept average or slightly below average defense at the corners in exchange for the elite contact skills you referenced before, above average power, strong batted ball data. And you got to also mention the context here of Francisco Lindor and Marcus Semien providing stability up the middle. They're prioritizing offensive ceiling from all these players, and the defense from Semien and Lindor will certainly help. So we saw the introductory press conference today. A lot of conversation in New York, a lot of headlines coming out of this. We feel like this is becoming a daily thing here with John Harbaugh with the Giants and We're doing all these introductory press conferences. I'm sure they'll do something small for maybe a Cody Bellinger thing tomorrow, even though he's been in house. But I do have a clip of him talking just in brief. I kind of chopped it up a little bit, just discussing what he wants to do and what he believes for the Mets. And I want your feedback on this. I'm not sure if you listened already yet.
I didn't hear it yet. Nope.
All right, let's play it.
Yeah, so it's very exciting to be here. This has been an exciting time for me. A lot of, several conversations with teams, several good conversations, but with a lot of prayer and conversations with my family and my agents and even some friends, came to the conclusion that it was very obvious that I wanted to be a Met. Mr. Cohen and David have put together an organization that is looking to win every single year, has an opportunity to win a World Series every single year, and a roster that backs that up. And it's very exciting to be a part of the city, one of the best cities in the world, maybe the best city in the world. Fans, some of the best fans in the world, and all of that is something I've always wanted to be a part of. So excited to be here and excited to be a Met.
So mostly by the book stuff you got here. John Heyman did ask a really tough question about the opt-outs where Bo Bichette looked over, didn't know how to answer the question, but your immediate thoughts on the pomp and circumstance and how Bichette's presenting himself of wanting to be a Met.
Sure. I mean, it's similar. Listen, the critics will be like, oh, you didn't want to be a Met. You just wanted the money. Same thing that happened with the Soto stuff. Yeah, to be honest, you just took the money. Sure. Of course, these guys take the money. But I do think there's something to be said as the Mets have become more of a destination because of Steve Cohen, and they've built an organization, right? We've heard a lot about the pitching lab and everything else. Like they're not just focused on the major league roster and just that, and talked about how they treat families, right? We can make all these jokes about all that kind of stuff, but I think there's some truth to it. With that being said, you mentioned the John Heyman question where Bo kind of hesitated and his agent stepped in and said whatever he said to kind of avoid the question. But yes, there is a possibility it ends up being a 1-year stay. With that being said, and I know we said this about Bregman and he ended up opting out of $40 million. Bo could definitely do that. It seems unlikely to me that he's going to turn down the next part of this enormous AAV, but if he absolutely kills it, and we will say next year's free agent market is pretty weak. Like the top free agents that I've seen are like Randy Arozarena and Nico Horner. And no offense to those guys, those are solid players, but that top of the free agency has been some pretty tip-top players the last several years when we talk about Shohei Ohtani and Juan Soto and Kyle Tucker and on and on and on. It's not looking like that kind of offseason. So Bo might see that and be like, no, I am going to opt out. So we'll see. But right now we're focused on what he's going to bring to the Mets in 2026. Seem to say the right things. And here's the thing, man. He had the exact offer that he apparently asked for from the Philadelphia Phillies. As a Met fan, I'm going to be honest, it's pretty sweet taking this dude right out from under them. And I'll give, as a big David Stearns critic for the last year or so, I will give him some credit here because clearly he had done the groundwork on this, even though Tucker was their top target. And this was the quickest turnaround. And it wasn't a desperation like, oh, where do we throw our money? They had already had this on the back burner. And Bo, I think, clearly was waiting for it, which is also why I believe he really did kind of want to be here. Because he met with the Phillies, I think, on that Monday, right? And nothing. Said the meeting went well. And then all of a sudden, the other news drops. And the next thing you know, he's a Met. So I do think he was waiting to see what happened with the Mets. I do think Stearns and Cohen both thought Kyle Tucker was theirs. I've heard reports that they didn't even think the Dodgers were really seriously in it. So they kind of played everybody for a fool there, the Dodgers, that is. So yeah, I have no problem with any of the press conference today from the clips I read about or the clip you just played. I'm excited to have Bo here, man. I think he's a first-class player. I know he's excited to be reunited with Marcus Semien, who he played with in Toronto for a little while. Said he had a big impact on his career. So suddenly it's a balanced lineup. We talk about righty lefty. There's power in a lot of different spots. You have a little youth, maybe Carson Bench here. It's a soft landing spot for a guy like Bench if he is relied on early in the season to be one of the starting outfielders. Because like There's so many other guys that have been there, done that. Just kind of do your job and you have time to get it together. So I very much like the lineup. You add Freddy Peralta to the pitching staff. I'm not going to sit here and say I love it. I still think there's a lot of question marks, but it's deep. You got depth. You got depth for sure. At Freddy Peralta, you know what you're going to get. Nolan McLean, I mean, the ceiling is super sky high. David Peterson, I think, just ran out of gas. I still believe in him very, very much. Remember, for most of the season, he was the only guy going 7-8 innings for the Mets. I like David Peterson very much still. Kodai Senga can be even close to what we've seen when he's at his top shape. Sean Manaea, if he can find the groove back, I think he came back too early. Like, seriously, you're looking at this. Clay Holmes, let's see if he can go a little deeper into games. It's not a bad rotation at this point. I don't think it's great, but there's a lot to like here. I think the biggest question mark will be, let's see about this defense, because David Stearns made such a stink about run prevention, and you have a bunch of guys playing out of position. But that up the middle defense, man, Marcus Semien, Lindor, Luis Robert in center, I mean, that looks pretty stout.
So let's talk about Luis Robert Jr. This came out last night with the trade, followed shortly thereafter. Robert is a different kind of bet than we're discussing with Bichette. Less certainty, more volatility, but one that really fits in the same short-term upside-driven framework that David Stearns has laid out in this offseason and beyond. So he's still just 28 years old, remains one of the fastest players in the league, ranks in the 92nd percentile in bat speed, brings high-end defense, as you mentioned, in center field. And the recent production has cratered. I mean, we mentioned this, the slash line, 223, 288, 372, and 856 plate appearances since the start of 2024. The strikeout rate nearing 30%. But you got to look at the ceiling here. It remains evident. I mean, as recently as 2023, he hit 38 home runs. He won a Silver Slugger Award, produced roughly 5 WAR while playing elite defense. So from the financial side for the Mets, they're absorbing the entirety of Robert's $20 million salary. They added in a $2 million buyout on his 2027 club option, which creates in total a $46.2 million total commitment once the luxury tax penalties are applied. So yeah, the cost is kind of significant, but Steve Cohen and the money there, the risk is pretty much capped here. If Luis Robert rebounds, and it's a big if because we have to see what he becomes, the $20 million option for 2027 could absolutely be a bargain. But if not, the Mets have limited their exposure to just this short window. But if you take these things together, and I think that's what you have to do here, you mentioned all the pieces fitting together, the Bichette signing, now the Freddy Peralta trade, and now the Robert trade. Money aside, this is a Met team that needed to do something. Ownership has clearly decided that paying this historic tax bill is preferable to carrying the long-time downside of the risk in these long-term contracts. So you're going to see the implications of this roster immediately. Bichette's going to create pressure to resolve an infield surplus. You mentioned Beatty and Vientos and Ronnie Mauricio and others, and several of those guys are out of minor league options. So what's going to happen with them? And Robert, he's stepping in as the everyday center fielder. He pushes Tyrone Taylor into a depth role, which is what you really want. It delays full-time opportunities for Carson Bench and at the time Jet Williams, but he's gone now too. Maybe Carson Bench winds up starting in the outfield in the corner. But these moves all but close the door on other things in the offense. It closed the door on Cody Bellinger, which we saw do it today. I think the Luis Robert piece kind of was the final domino that pushed Cody Bellinger back in the Yankees' lap. But all these things baked together, I really like what the Mets did here. And defense can't be discounted. The thing is, Luis Robert Jr. is a guy out there that's going to play great center field. And for run prevention, guy playing up the middle like that, you cannot discount that for a team that's trying to win a World Series.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. To touch upon his fielding, I found it interesting. You go to the analytics and you see 7 OAA. You're like, oh, wow, okay, this is great. You mentioned the sprint speed. I think Sarah Langs actually tweeted last night when the trade went down. He's one of 3 players where his sprint speed and his bat speed is above the 90th percentile, both of them. I believe the other 2 are O'Neal Cruz and Julio Rodriguez. Julio Rodriguez is a star. O'Neal Cruz is not delivered. And Luis Robert's been frustrating. We've seen a full season of the star he can be, as you mentioned before, in 2023. Other than that, he has been extremely frustrating. But we know the talent that is there. Another person that I really trust, and I've mentioned him on here before, is the Warmonger on Twitter. Puts out great stuff. And a lot of, I think his best work is when he focuses on outfield work. And he talks about 5-star plays a lot. He always seems to have that information before anybody else. So if you're watching a real game this season and someone makes an incredible catch, you can go right to Warmonger, and there's a good chance he has the information of like just how great that actually was based on how much ground they covered and what the jump was and all that stuff. And anyway, he made a point that said Luis Robert actually is kind of confusing in the field because there's some analytics that make him look way above average and others that make him look a little below average. And his point was that he'll go make the spectacular play and then not make the play that he should make easily. So I do wonder some of that, of the like lack of durability, being on the field, being accountable, making, not making plays you should, striking out too much. I wonder some of that is if some of that is just getting sleepy in Chicago. Like, you got to remember the timeline of Luis Robert is kind of like he and Eloy Jimenez were brought up and expected to just be the guys right away. And it just didn't work out. Eloy got hurt even more than Luis Robert. Luis Robert showed glimpses, but also got hurt. So I wonder if going to a place like Queens with stars like Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor that are just baseball obsessed, that are coming to work every day wanting to win, if some of the eyes are off him, if he can just go play ball and try to be the best he can be. My biggest concern is durability. I'm not a Luis Robert guy, mainly because those kind of players on my team really, really frustrate me, that are like in the lineup for a few weeks and then out for a couple months. And it's just like, come on. You got Tyrone Taylor now as a reserve outfielder, which he should be. Can't really hit consistently. With that being said, great defensive guy. So I still love having him on my team. We'll see what Luis Robert is in New York. The picture is still unclear. With that being said, I agree with you. I think it's a worthy risk for the Mets. The money, I mean, they're the team that can handle it. Great job by Chicago getting to dump all the money. I will say, if they pulled the trigger on a Luis Robert deal a year or more ago, I think they would have gotten a lot more. I mean, this guy's been in the trade rumors for a while, and we saw some prices in the past that were like, oh man, like they're going to get something for this guy. Not a whole lot here. Luis Angel Acuna, a nice defensive replacement, has some speed. I saw someone say he has untapped power. He's not his brother, guys. Like, he's an Acuna. That doesn't mean he has the power of Ronald's. Like, he doesn't. I know he got off to a crazy start when he first got called up by the Mets a couple years ago and hit like 3 home runs in 4 games. Guess how many home runs he has as a Met all time? 3. He hasn't hit any since then.
People are falling in love with the 4 home runs he had in Venezuela, I think. I mean, I don't think it's a
Yeah.
coincidence to see this happen, where
I agree.
I think that is something where you see this player. And again, I think the main thing is the White Sox dumping the money. They're not going to be
Sure.
competitive this year, but also getting a player like Acuna fits into, and maybe they see something in him that can make him into an everyday player. But I mean, most of the hits we're seeing from him, they don't leave the infield. This is a player that is a very soft hitting, defense first type of player, which can be useful. We discussed that, but he's not going to be this guy hitting 4 home runs in a game. It's just an aberration that we saw here.
If you're the White Sox and you like the player and you think if he gets the chance to play every day, you're going to see something different, then I can't blame them for that. Everyone evaluates these guys differently. I mean, I, as a Met fan, was excited when we traded for him a couple years ago, seeing the profile. I think at one point he was a top 100 prospect, kind of fell out after that. So I think it's a good job on both teams' part. And to go back to the Peralta trade, I'm a Met fan, so of course this news breaks as soon as we hit play today. My thought is about the Mets, but let me just say this about the Brewers before we move too far away. I think the Brewers knew they were trading Freddy Peralta. It's kind of about like, what are they going to get back? Sure, he's being paid $8 million, which is another reason he's expensive, because like the team taking him on, you're not responsible for giving him a whole lot of money here. But they did well here. I can tell you as a Met fan, Jet Williams, just like Caleb Durbin coming from the Yankees last year, Jet Williams is a Brewer. This guy is prototypical Brewer. He fits right into their mold. Shorter guy, really knows the strike zone, is going to take his walks, has more pop than it looks like he has, going to play solid defense, going to steal some bases. This dude, you know how we said the Orioles have, like everyone said the Orioles have a type, it looks like carbon copies, like a bunch of frat boys out there, right? The Brewers have a type as well, and Jet Williams fits them perfectly. And as far as Brandon Sproat, man, if you're going to trade your best current starting pitcher away, you better get a good one back. And they got a good one back. And like, how can you not believe that they're going to turn him into the best version of himself? That's what the Brewers do. So I think a good job on both parts. I think it makes sense. Both of these trades, the Luis Robert trade, I think makes sense for both teams. At first, when I saw him, like, holy crap, super cheap. But it's just they waited too long. So they did a good job at least getting rid of all the money. And then the Brewers, well done. The Mets, this is what their fans wanted. So they've pulled off some big moves here in the last week. So well done to everybody involved.
Yeah, before we move off the Mets here, really what stands out about this is the consistency of the approach of David Stearns and the Mets front office, because you go back to the bidding war for Kyle Tucker. They capped their year at 4 years. They went 3 for Bichette. They assumed Roberts' contract without adding any long-term risk. And now they're just taking on enormous short-term costs to chase the upside. And yeah, 1 year after the Juan Soto signing, that is a long-term signing. The organization is showing a clear preference of the flexibility, even if it means operating at that extreme edge of that luxury tax. It's the new norm in baseball. And we were talking hyperbolically because we did the reaction episode with Kyle Tucker, but these short-term high AAV deals, I feel like are going to be the norm for these big market teams that don't want to assume risk, and especially that they have players waiting to come up. For so long, we watch these free agent deals come out, and you're assuming a lot of risk on the back end. Even the best players in baseball, you can name all of them. Eventually, Father Time is undefeated. They will eventually teeter out, and you're paying a player that's not going to be on the field. For the Mets here, for the Dodgers, these teams are willing to pay for short term. We'll pay 110% tax on what we're doing here. I mean, we look at this, the Mets being taxed, and that's not an exaggeration. They're being taxed at 110% on most of the spending. And Bichette alone is projected to cost more than $86 million in 2026 alone, once you start factoring all the tax penalties. And, again, they don't care. This is a 3-time repeat luxury tax, pay or above the 304 top tier. The Mets are going to do this in the immediate because they know it's best for the franchise. They want to win a World Series, but they don't want to be locked in for years after it. And when you have an owner like Steve Cohen, you can do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're operating. The short-term deals can be frustrating because, one thing I complain about and why I've kind of fallen out of love with college basketball over the past several years, maybe decade, and I really don't watch, to be completely honest, until March Madness or right before it, is so many of these teams, the team is different every year, right? I like to, and again, aging myself a little bit, old man yells at cloud, but like it when you can watch a team in college basketball that is together for a few years and kind of gets better each year together. Now it's a bunch of mercenaries, really, and you can't blame them. They're going by the system, but mercenaries each year, and there's so much money involved in college sports. Whole different conversation. We could do a different podcast about that. But it's similar to kind of these short-term deals that David Stearns loves. But it does make some business sense. And the other point about the short-term deals is we talk all the time about how college baseball has become so good at developing players, which has shortened the pipeline to Major League Baseball. It's another thing that front offices don't necessarily want to lock up these spots for years and years because you see these kids come up and you're like, I want to have space for these guys. I don't want them to constantly be blocked and then just have to kind of deal those guys away. So it makes some sense. I think the long-term deals, the Bryce Harper, Manny Machado 10-year deals, the Juan Soto 15-year deals, I think we saw some 13-year deals involved. I think those are starting to fall out of favor unless they're the kind of Bobby Witt kind of deal where you're locking a kid up in his first or second year. Jackson Churio, I think, was locked up by the Brewers before he even stepped on a major league field. Reds apparently have tried to do it with Ellie. That story came out this week. I think those will still be out there. Ronald Acuna, right? Which he probably regrets. At least he should at this point. So yeah, it's super interesting. I wonder, just to cap the Mets conversation, because we've gone long here. I wonder if there's still more moves here, because again, the rotation, whether you're saying it's a really good rotation or mediocre, they still have a lot of starters there. So I don't know if there's another move they're looking to make. I really was convinced Framber Valdez was going to be their next move and he was going to be a Met. I think they probably still have money to do it because you acquire Peralta $8 million and you move player capital for him. I still think it's a possibility, but I almost feel like they'll do something else here, kind of some depth stuff, bullpen, and maybe Framber Valdez now is an Oriole. I don't know. That seems like the logical fit at this point, with some other teams doing other things, maybe falling out of the race for his services.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say, you never can count out Steve Cohen. And there's probably a diametric difference in mindset between David Stearns and Steve Cohen, where they're like, I want the player and they want the flexibility. And that's probably what makes them a good team, because they balance each other out. You're not going to assume too much risk. And it seems to be this offseason has turned it around. They did a little bit of a U-turn here where there's a lot of negativity in Metland about it. And it seems like today there's some positivity. And that just shows how quickly it moves. But let's move to the Bronx over here and the boogie down the Yanks. A lot of pessimism about what the offseason looked like. And Brian Cashman has awoken out of his sleeping bag and has made a move here. The Yankees re-signed Cody Bellinger. To me, Devin, this always felt like the most natural outcome once the season ended, even if the process took a few turns to get there. I texted you and you're like, yep, seems about right. the final agreement, 5 years, $162.5 million, no deferrals. I think that really reflects both the success of his first year in pinstripes and also the realities of the market that took shape around him. Want to talk about waiting too long? The structure of this deal is notable, though. Bellinger receives $20 million in a signing bonus, which follows a $32.5 million salaries in the first 2 seasons, $25.8 million in each of the next 2, $25.9 million in the final year. He holds opt-outs after the second and third seasons. Those are pushed back by the year if 2027 season is canceled due to a lockout, which I thought was strategic and kind of protects the player. He also receives a full no trade clause. So from Bellinger's perspective, front loading and secures $85 million over the first 2 years and preserves the flexibility if he continues to perform at a high level. And then from the Yanks side, the lockout provision effectively guarantees at least 2 seasons of control of the player. So we could talk about the numbers, and I feel like we've already done it because we've talked about Bellinger all year here. 29 home runs, 272 batting average, a WRC plus of 125. Yankee Stadium was favorable. He had 302 at home. He stole 13 bases, graded well defensively across the outfield. He finished with a 4.9 F-WAR. A two-way contribution. I mean, you can't replace that externally, particularly for a team that's operating at the very top of the competitive balance tax tiers. You want to talk about 2 different mindsets. The Yankees are not really willing to go over that. So context does matter of all of this. And we will discuss, I mean, the Kyle Tucker thing, the Bichette thing certainly affected this. The trade with Luis Robert, again, like I mentioned before, pushed Cody Bellinger back in the Yankees camp. And this game of chicken, as you said on X earlier at Tablesetters Pod, it has come to an end. And Cody Bellinger, he got paid, but he kind of had to, put his tail between his legs and walk back to the Yanks.
Yeah, tail behind his legs with what, 30-something million a year. I know what you're saying, though. The market has been so crazy with some of the AAVs this year, and you were the one that said, like, it's kind of like a good deal for the Yanks here, so I get it. I mean, I agree with you, and I think most people out there have the same sentiment of, like, it just felt like it was going to be an upset if he ended up somewhere else. Obviously, the longer it went on, and it sounded like it got at least a little contentious, you started to think maybe there is a chance, but then when you see the Mets go make a different move for the outfields, that almost like locked it up, like, because they were the report before that was Cody Bellinger has offers from the Mets, Yankees, and 2 other teams that we didn't know about. And I'd love to hear who those other 2 teams were. My guess would be maybe the Blue Jays, maybe the Phillies, who kind of recently missed out on some other guys. But I could be completely off base with that. Earlier in the offseason, there was some rumor about the Giants. So I don't know, but I think it's the right fit. I think Yankee Stadium is going to get the best out of Cody Bellinger. A hell of a defensive presence. I like that. This brings me to really 2 things is, and I want you, we've talked about this before. What they've kind of done at this point is, for the most part, bring the band back together, other than Devin Williams, Luke Weaver. They've let those guys go. And they've added Ryan Weathers to the rotation, which hopefully gets them through things to get to Garrett Cole coming back and all that stuff. And Garrett Cole will rejoin. And Cam Schlittler, you get a full season out of him. And Luis Heel, you hopefully get a full season out of him. So those are some pluses that probably not enough people are mentioning. But my question is that enough? Like, if they stop now and maybe just do some small stuff, is it enough to basically bring the band back together and have some of these other guys be here for more of the season? I mean, I'm on the record, I think Schlittler's an absolute star. And we'll see what Garrett Cole looks like when he comes back. So is it enough?
Well, I mean, I mentioned this to give a quick plug for our appearance on Brady Farkas's podcast, Refuse to Lose. I was discussing my hesitations about this team. And, this was before Bellinger signed, obviously, because it happened today and we appeared earlier in the week. My hesitation is looking at the outfield. You mentioned bringing the band back together. So now Bellinger joins Trent Grissom, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton's going to be at DH. And Bellinger's going to be handling some first base duties, maybe spelling Ben Rice, who's now going to take on the duties of being a full-time first base. My concern about this team is obviously the injury concerns. You got Garrett Cole coming back from long-term injury. He's going to be joining the team later on in the season. Carlos Rodon, same thing. Anthony Volpe, to me, he's a big X factor for this team. And also at third base, the fact that you have Ryan McMahon slot as your third baseman, like, yes, defensively, you love what he can bring there, but are you really feeling good about that side of the infield at shortstop and third base with Volpe and McMahon? I really wish they would have done something different. And hey, it's not over. Maybe they trade for Brendan Donovan and we're looking at this being like, oh, I really like what the Yanks did. But Bellinger feels like a no-brainer. And it was a reunion. Like, maybe both sides wanted to just see if grass was greener, but it makes sense for both sides. So I do have hesitations. I don't think it's enough, but you kind of put yourself in this position this offseason of take what you can get. and maybe something else will be out there. And they're going to be suitors at the deadline as well. Maybe they're just trying to stand pat right now with, like I mentioned before, with Volpe at short, see if there really was an issue with his shoulder, if he returns to the player he was with the pop. And again, third base, that's a clear spot for an upgrade. Other than that, I'm pretty confident going to war with the rest of the guys in the lineup.
Well, the Volpe thing's interesting too, because he apparently, I don't think he's going to be ready. From what I've read, he's not going to be ready for the beginning of the season unless things kind of hurry up and go faster than they expected. Jose Caballero, I guess, is going to be the shortstop at the beginning of the year, and he brings some interesting things to the team, whether it be stealing bases, better defense, stuff like that. And he's a streaky guy, I feel like, offensively. But if he tears it up the first month or so before Volpe gets back, and people might laugh at that, but like he's the kind of player who could surprisingly tear it up. I could see him being the guy that just ends up being beloved by Yankee fans, that kind of role player who just does really well over kind of goes above expectations. He's stealing a bunch of bases, playing solid defense. Like, is it a given that Volpe gets his job back?
Not a given, because we saw even last year during spells, Jose Caballero, who was great from coming over from the Rays at the deadline, seeing what he brought to the table, he was a fan favorite immediately. So if there are struggles defensively or otherwise from Volpe, there will be a clamoring from the fan base that we want Caballero to be playing. But yeah, it's not a given, because I think it's next man up. And if there are struggles similar to what we saw last year, Volpe does not have as much rope as everyone thinks he does.
Yeah. I'm bullish on the Yankees, man. I've been consistent with this. Like, people forget, go look at the team stats. They're easily the best offensive team last year. So, like, bringing back pretty much the same offense, people shouldn't be saying that's a bad thing. I know we get you sent us that great tweet, and I wish I could give the person credit. If you still have it, tell me who put it out, about like the difference between the baseball off season and like football and basketball, where it's like we really get into the minutia and like break every little thing down, and it's just not like that in any sport. But I don't know. The Yankees won 94 games last year, barely lost out on the division because of tiebreakers. And were the best offensive team in Major League Baseball pretty easily. And then obviously didn't get it done in the playoffs. Anything can happen in some of those short series too. And like I said, if you feel like they're a 94 win team again, and you're getting a full season of Cam Schlittler, who certainly looked the part and maybe will just get better. Garrett Cole eventually is back in the mix. Luis Gil, who was rookie of the year like not so long ago, we forget that. If he can find the best version of himself, I mean, I'm bullish on them. I do think the back end of the bullpen might be a little iffy, letting those guys go and kind of putting all your faith in David Bednar. But I don't know, man. I think they're going to be in the mix for sure. I will say this. You mentioned Brendan Donovan. Well, if they acquire Brendan Donovan, I love the player. I could picture him in a Yankee uniform. But where's he playing? Like, does that mean you're trying to ship McMahon off somewhere? Jazz is at second. You don't do the whole thing you did to Jazz when you first acquired him, putting him out of position. Like, let the dude play second base. What are you doing with Brendan Donovan?
He'd be the starting third baseman tomorrow, and I think everyone would be okay. Ryan McMahon is a professional baseball player, but to be a versatile player on the New York Yankees, I don't think that's a downgrade. Yeah. Ryan McMahon can have meaningful at-bats, and we know how things work out. There's always injuries throughout the season, where being the guy who's playing different positions in the infield, Ryan McMahon could do that. And like mixing guys around, like you mentioned the Jazz thing, I want Jazz to play his normal position. He's the guy you kind of want to put in concrete in that spot. But there is a spot on this team for Ryan McMahon to have a decent amount of at-bats and not be the starting third baseman this year. I really believe that.
Okay, that's fair. I remember, just speaking of the Jazz stuff, I got, and a non-Yankee fan here, I got like mad at the report. Remember the report came out with that when they acquired Jazz, the intention was to play him at second and move Gleyber Torres, I think, to third. And Gleyber Torres basically just said no. And I was like, what? That's not a thing. You can't just listen. Like, you're the manager, Aaron Boone. Like, you're the president of baseball operations, Brian Cash. And if you acquired this dude to play second, tell this dude he's moving. Like, he's an adult. He's probably out the door anyway. I still remember that story. That was absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, that was the start of the end for Gleyber in New York. That was essentially the end. And Gleyber, for all his goodwill that he had, I feel like for the Yankees, they just moved away from it. But going back to it, I pulled up the tweet. Actually, I'm going to pull it up on our screen because I found it and I had to search for it. A great tweet that we would be remiss if we didn't show it. But we have a question from Nick in the chat. He said, "What do we think about the Martian? Is any faith over?" That was a good question, because outfielders like Jason Dominguez and also Spencer Jones, who's been marinating in the minors at this point, they have a little bit of an unclear path to everyday playing time. And again, I mentioned injuries. There will be time and at bats. Jason Dominguez is such a big question mark for me for this team. And there was a lot of faith in him. And yeah, not every player comes up and dominates from the immediate. I think we have high expectations, especially in New York, but to get Jason Dominguez to the level of expectation to be in the outfield, starting for the Yankees and having meaningful at bats and relying on him, I think we have such a long way to go. And I hate to say that too. And then for Spencer Jones as well, right now, the Trent Grisham thing, and this was a huge thing around New York. If you guys aren't local to New York, when Trent Grisham and they offered him the qualifying offer and he came back, people's heads were going to explode just the amount of money they're paying Trent Grisham. But you got to remember like how Trent Grisham carried this lineup last year. So is he going to have regression? Possibly. But at the same time, the Yankees need to have those home runs and the power in there. And Trent Grisham, maybe they unlock something. Like everyone wants to be so quick to be a pessimist, but some of the stuff you're seeing from Trent Grisham, it was pretty reliable all last season. Are we to believe that it's all the bottom's going to fall out again? I know there's a large sample size of him not doing it, but at the same time, if the Yankees believe it, they saw him on an everyday basis working hard. Maybe they think he can bring it in 2026.
Yeah, I'd almost be more concerned with Grisham's defense and center because there were times, once upon a time, Grisham was like a fun outfielder to watch. I feel like maybe his days in San Diego when he was still more of a fourth outfielder, like he could really go chase that ball down, like play outfield pretty well. Last year, he looked like he was a shell of himself, like jogging to balls. And there's a lot of reports that like he was dealing with a hamstring injury basically the entire year that he was trying not to, not to make worse. But I will ask you, we'll go to the tweet first, but I want to ask you, and we'll try to get through the Yankees talk here so we can get to the Hall of Fame stuff too. But if the move was, we got to look to trade Jason Dominguez here, get some value out of him. If that was the move, your GM, what are you looking? You don't have to give me a specific person. Well, what are you looking to trade him for? Like, what are you looking to acquire right now if you are moving Jason Dominguez? I guess, or Spencer Jones too. But Dominguez is the guy we've actually seen on the field. Spencer Jones is still a little bit of a mystery. He strikes out all the time. So I don't know what the value is there.
It would have to be immediately pitching that impacts this team on a weekly basis. So that means starting rotation caliber. You're not going to get top of line ace maybe with the whole Jason Dominguez. But if you put in the best package together, they should be in on pretty much any pitcher that's available. The issue here is that, and they have this all the time, and being local to New York, if you guys are familiar with some of the prospects that Brian Cashman, a lot of Yankee fans become so intimately in love with a lot of these prospects, like a Jason Dominguez, like a Gary Sanchez, like a Clint Frazier, like a Miguel Andujar, all of these names. And maybe it's the issue the Yankees were unable to develop them to their fullest extent, or when they went elsewhere. Miguel Andujar certainly had some decent years hitting for some power, but none of these players were as advertised. And that is, I guess, the fear here, where we're all looking at Jason Dominguez to be really the next Aaron Judge. Like, and I understand Aaron Judge is a 1 of 1, maybe a 0 of 1. There's no one like him out there, but that was the expectation of a Jason Dominguez. And to cut cost on him, I do not believe the Yankees are going to do that. They're the bottom would have to completely fall out, and it hasn't gotten to that level yet. They're going to give him every opportunity to be a part of this team in the future.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they end up moving him or even consider it with their track record here. I think they'd be too afraid of him becoming a star, like a superstar somewhere else. Because I mean, that's what he was expected to be. But I think of, I don't know, it pops into my head of actually I tweeted about this guy that there was no chance he was going to be traded. It was like one of our most interacted with tweets of all time, actually the most. And now I'm going to go and say like, oh, maybe they should trade him. Brian Abreu in Houston. I think he's on the last year of his deal. Maybe the most underrated late game reliever because he's behind Josh Hader. They're all already paying Hader $1 bazillion, right? So like Abreu on the last year's contract, he would be such an acquisition for any contender to help at the back end of the bullpen. I'm not saying a straight up 1-for-1, but Abreu is proven as hell. I'm sure the Astros would probably have to throw more in there to convince the Yankees. But if you ask Astro fans, they might say the opposite. I don't think the Yankees and Astros end up talking to each other, to be honest. I don't think there's any love lost there. So they're not going to send their potential future superstar to the Houston Astros, because that, talk about what it could be a PR disaster if Dominguez ends up being a star. But it's just, when I think of a guy they could really use, that's the mold of a guy I'm thinking about, just a really, really good reliever for the back end of the bullpen that could play like multiple different roles.
Yeah, and the Yankees front office and the public relations that surrounds it, we discussed this with Caleb Durbin. They pump the tires and they inflate the cost on some of these guys, where sometimes you don't know what really to believe. The Caleb Durbins of the world, like, they feels like they're inflating the cost for the trade market. And for Jason Mingus, I do believe they are genuine in their belief of the player. And we saw the skill set, whether it be the minor leagues. We saw what he could do. It just hasn't translated yet in the Bronx. And a lot of it is defensive. Like, I mean, I went on about this last year. He should be in a parka right now at Yankee Stadium fielding fly balls. Figure it out.
Dude, maybe he is. We don't know. We don't know. We don't have a
You're right.
a camera on Yankee Stadium.
I
Maybe he's there right now.
But let's go to the tweet quick. If you guys aren't watching live. So this is from James Shiano, James_Shiano, one of the better tweets of the year. So Jeff Passan dropped the tweet for Bradley Blaylock being traded from the Colorado Rockies to the Miami Marlins. So there is a tweet he wrote: NFL fans, our offseason takes 12 hours. NBA fans, our offseason takes 2 weeks. MLB fans, Blaylock is a good buy low, leaving Colorado because of a decent road splits and multiple quality breaking balls. He could be a solid depth for the Marlins with their pitcher-friendly home ballpark. So it just speaks to exactly what this is. That's baseball, man. We're all sitting here breaking down Blaylock being DFA'd by the Rockies last week and giving the Marlins additional pitch and depth. And we're all sitting here breaking it down. Like, how does this affect Edward Cabrera? That is baseball to the team. If you guys are out there as a diehard baseball fan, you get it.
Yeah, no doubt. It was so well done. It just makes all the sense in the world. That's baseball offseason, man. We are in it, and not just us. We're all in it every single day, every little move. And there's no such thing as a little move. Like, there will be someone on Twitter breaking something down, making it seem like a huge move, even if it's a guy that just got waived. That's just how the baseball offseason works.
So we go into the Cooperstown discussion. So the Baseball's Writers Association of America has added 2 more of the defining center fielders of the early this generation. So they elected Carlos Beltrán and Andrew Jones to the Hall of Fame. They'll be inducted on July 26th alongside Jeff Kent, who was elected earlier by the ERA committee. So Beltrán appeared on 84.2% of ballots in his 4th year of eligibility, while Andrew Jones crossed the threshold at 78.4% in his 9th. So we can break this down and talk about it. You are very partial to Beltrán's career. We can go back to his first year in Queens being disappointing, but his 2006 season remains one of the finest ever by a Mets position player, hitting 41 home runs, drove in 116 runs, Gold Glove, Silver Slugger, finished 4th in MVP voting, and not to mention the 06 run that should have probably ended in a World Series title. And then you can talk about his productive stops with the Giants or the Cardinals, even the Yankees, the Rangers, a return back to Houston. And the controversy around this, you can't help but to escape it. He was involved in the sign stealing operation. Maybe there's some people out there with the ethics of that sign stealing stuff, the cheating, that believe he should be held out of the Hall of Fame. That being said, he deserves to be there. The numbers are there. All the things that we had. I mean, this guy is a Hall of Fame worthy player, and it's great to see him in there. And it makes me feel old when we see players like this that we saw pretty much their whole career. And how could we not talk about the midseason trade to Houston in 2004 on a national stage? Beltrán took the brass ring and ran with it after hitting 23 home runs in 90 regular season games with the Astros. I mean, he authored one of the greatest postseason performances in history, batted .435 with 8 home runs in 12 playoff games. And that really what set the stage for that free agent run with the Mets, franchise record-setting 7-year, $119 million deal. We'll talk about Andrew Jones in a second, but I want to give you the platform to discuss Carlos Beltrán.
Yeah, Beltrán. I remember that postseason before he came to the Mets sticks out. The trade over from the Royals, where he was already a very good player, all-star caliber player, but just kind of launched himself into superstardom with that postseason. And I believe it was at the time it was a record where 5 straight games he hit at least 1 home run. That ended up being broken by Daniel Murphy. Funny enough, not the guy that you would think would break that. I think he won 6 games in a row or something. Just crazy. But I believe he tied Barry Bonds at the time for 8 postseason home runs. He went absolutely nuts. I put a clip of, I think it was his 8th home run of the postseason on Twitter when I tweeted about him last night. And like, if you look at that clip, the guy's so strong. The ball's like low and outside, and he goes and gets it and somehow just flies out of the ballpark. He, to me, is one of those guys, and I remember early on in his Mets tenure, so he signed for 7 years, $119 million for the Mets, which was a record at the time. Omar Minaya got it done. It was a big deal. But I remember for the first little while watching him as a Met, myself and a lot of other Met fans, like, almost got frustrated. Sometimes it looked like he wasn't fully trying, like not bursting after a fly ball, right? No, if you watch him long enough, and I feel like Gary Cohen would kind of teach the viewer this, he was just that good and just that smooth. There's only a few guys that fall into this category. Robbie Cano would be another person, like in his prime as a Yankee, that I think would sometimes the casual fan will be like, "What, this dude's like kind of like being showy and like not trying his hardest and trying to be flashy and like too cool." No, they're just that smooth, dude. Such a natural. Carlos Beltrán could do everything in the game. And in his prime, like he could steal bases. He was a great center fielder who could go get the ball. Obviously could hit. Yeah, I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. You got to talk about passing the eye test. We can give you the numbers, and it's interesting that a lot of those two's numbers, not only did they both play center field, you look at their career numbers, there's some big similarities between the two. But yeah, I love seeing Beltrán in there. It'll be interesting to see. He said he's deciding between a Royals hat and a Mets hat. He didn't say it's a given. So I mean, he works for the Mets now. So I would kind of think he goes with the Mets here, but not all that sure. So good for him. I know the Astros thing. You have to put that in a footnote, but I think he was punished enough for that, in my opinion. I don't know how big of a role. Some people say he had a huge role. Others will tell you he didn't have much of a role. Listen, it was a whole team thing, culture thing. And he then got hired by the Mets as manager, people forget, and then got fired because of all the revelations of the Astros. So I think he paid pretty dearly there. He's a guy who really does want to manage. I think he still wants to manage. So good for Carlos Beltrán.
Yeah, and for the most part, I was reading about just players that pick what hat they want to go in, and I think ultimately the final decision will be announced, but typically they'll allow a player to pick the hat they want to wear unless it's egregious. Like if you go back to Wade Boggs wanting to wear a Devil Rays hat in the Hall of Fame, they kind of stepped in and said no. But the Gary Carter conversation went back and forth. He went in as an Expo, probably could have went in as a Met, but I think ultimately they kind of weighed out. And I'm not sure if there's a metric, but I think there's a discussion for all that. But for Andrew Jones, I think Andrew Jones is a big piece to this as well. It's a different, defined less by longevity, but really more of the most dominant peaks at the position we've ever seen. So this guy debuted in 1996 as a top prospect in the sport, immediately delivered on the biggest stage. You posted on our Instagram account and Twitter at 19 years old. He homered twice in Game 1 of the World Series against the Yanks, becoming the youngest player ever to homer in the Fall Classic at the time. The first season was developmental for him. Then he exploded into superstardom. Beginning in 1998, he combined really what people would call elite power with historically great defense. And I want to put the key word historically because this guy went on to hit 730 home run seasons, winning 10 consecutive Gold Gloves in center field from 1998 through 2006. He was the Gold Glove standard, really defensively in center field while ranking among the league's most dangerous power hitters. His 2005 season stands out of the offensive apex for him. 51 home runs, 128 RBIs, a Silver Slugger, and a second place MVP vote in really a tight race with Albert Pujols, the machine, just beating him out. We saw the career decline pretty sharply post-Atlanta, maybe several clubs playing as this role player. But if you look at just through his age 30 season, 368 home runs, according to Fangraphs, retroactive estimates saved roughly 134 runs defensively, a figure that separates him from every other outfielder in modern baseball. Next to him is Roberto Clemente, Willie Mays, Ken Griffey Jr., Al Kaline, and Ichiro as the only outfielders to win 10 Gold Gloves. So this is a player that deserves to be there. Jaws ranks him 11th among center fielders all time. He's going to enter Cooperstown as one of the greatest defenders that the sport has ever had.
Do you have the Jaws list up in front of you, or you just had that as a note?
I just pulled up his Jaws number. I had it open before. I can probably pull it up as we're speaking because I have the website.
All right, no big deal. I was just curious to see. I know you said 11th out of center fielders. I'd be curious to see what his Jaws number was, and they usually tell you what the average is for the Hall of Fame or the average Hall of Famer or something like that. But so yeah, I mean, you put a lot of good numbers out there, so I'm not going to repeat all of them. All I'll say here is, again, we go to eye test. There was an interesting tweet. You know how you can do those player comparisons. A lot of people put those out there, and we've put them out as well, side by sides. And someone put one up with Jim Edmonds. Like Jim Edmonds fell off the ballot right away when he was up. And Andrew Jones ends up making the Hall of Fame. And if you look at their numbers offensively, you're like, oh, wow, this guy has a point here because a lot of them are similar, or Edmonds is superior on the offensive side in some. And obviously, Jim Edmonds made some amazing defensive plays in his own right that we probably still remember in our brains right now, like the diving backwards towards the wall, just some crazy stuff. But there's a few other people who filed that tweet up like, listen, we get it. And we're not even saying Jim Edmonds shouldn't be a Hall of Famer, but trying to say they are the same player is just wrong. Like you said, Andrew Jones defensively is maybe the best center fielder you could ever watch. And some people might say that's like blasphemy and they have someone else in their head. there's a story I read today of someone who overheard Willie Mays, like who was at maybe it was a Braves Giants game, basically went up to Andrew Jones and said, "Hey, you're the best center fielder I've ever watched." That's coming from Willie Mays. This dude was just unbelievable. The fact that he came up at 19, hit those 2 home runs in his first 2 World Series at bats, just some nutty stuff. And I do think what hurt his case was what you mentioned of like how he kind of fell off pretty hard towards the end. I think that sometimes can hurt a player's case when you don't necessarily need to be dominant through the end. I mean, Mike Piazza finished his career with Padres and Athletics. Nobody remembers that, and was just like a decent player. So Andrew Jones is certainly not the only guy, but he did fall off maybe a little longer than most Hall of Famers at the end of their career. All right, here's the Jaws thing. All right. So, like you said, he appears 11th on this list. His Jaws number is 54.6, right under, and this is a good conversation to have, Kenny Lofton, who a lot of people have been on this case of like he needs to be up in the whatever it is, the errors committee that brings these guys back that are no longer on the ballot. I think Kenny Lofton's gonna be a Hall of Famer one day. There's enough. I think where there's smoke, there's gonna be fire, and I think there's a lot of smoke there around Kenny Lofton. 55.9 for Lofton, and then Carlos Beltrán right above them at 57.2. So the average of 19 Hall of Famers at the center field position is 58. So Beltrán and Andrew Jones fall a little bit under that. But there's other guys like Andre Dawson, who's been in the Hall of Fame, who also falls under that. So not the only ones. And then you have the guys above that with Joe DiMaggio, Ken Griffey Jr., Mickey Mantle, Tris Speaker, Ty Cobb, Willie Mays. And then one day, Mike Trout is also in that mix in between those guys. So just to kind of look at the future there.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, beyond the 2 inductees, Chase Utley made a significant jump, 59% of the vote, positioning him to as well for eventual election, which might be a surprise for some people. Among the first-time candidates, Cole Hamels was the only player to exceed the 5% threshold. Manny Ramirez fell off the ballot in his final year of eligibility, leaving his only remaining path in induction through the error committee that you mentioned before. So, I think a lot of this is conversation about reassessing how we look at players and their greatness. And there's no denying that both these players are Hall of Famers. But I do believe looking at just the different lens of baseball, whether it be the peak, as we mentioned on the Refuse to Lose pod about David Wright or Jacob deGrom or even Felix Hernandez, these guys need to be assessed in a different light, especially as we kind of move further and further away from this old school mentality of baseball. Some of these players are going to be taking a different path, and we have to kind of figure out what a Hall of Famer will be.
Yeah, that's going to be an ongoing discussion, I think, for the next 10 years. Things have changed. And just if you're listening and you're wondering what the hell is Jaws, we should have said that at the top. One of my favorite stats when it comes to Hall of Fame conversations, basically a tool that kind of combines regular WAR with your peak 7 years. And there's been a lot of talk about like maybe we need to start judging Hall of Fame more by a player's peak and how dominant it was. Because like in Andrew Jones, sometimes they fall off hard at the end and it kind of muddies the waters a little bit. But these dudes, if you watched them, they were Hall of Famers. And I think 7 years is fair. It's not like, oh, you were great for 3 years. A 7-year peak mixed with your total WAR. Once upon a time, the Hall of Fame has for a long time kind of been about number collection, right? You got to reach this 500 home runs, 300 wins, this many strikeouts, 3,000 hits, things like that. And it's a different game now. The injury situation is different. So I think not that longevity shouldn't be important, but it shouldn't be the only determining factor. I love the Jaws number.
Yeah, it's a good way to assess players. We're trying our best to quantify players in an objective way to discuss who is a Hall of Famer and who is the best at their position and otherwise. But as we mentioned before, we are going to be dropping another episode because we want to split this up. The Peralta thing caught us by surprise, so we spent a lot of time on that. We'll be dropping a later episode this week that's record only, and we're going to be dropping it on video, but we're going to review the CBS Dynasty mock-up draft that we did with Scott White and the boys with CBS Sports. 12-team head-to-head categories. We did a mock tonight at 8 p.m. Took about an hour and 30 minutes. Teams constructed, so Devin and I are going to break down. We're going to pull up the team and get you guys kind of ready for the remaining of your fantasy drafts, or if you're in Dynasty, getting you together for it. So as we head out the door, make sure you guys follow us at Tablesetters Pod on IG. You can also check us out on X at Tablesetters Pod. We have a follow train happening. Devin posting web gems every single day. The path to opening day. We want 2,000 followers. Please help us. If someone's out there you're not following us on Instagram, please do so. We got the Ken Griffey Jr. Super Nintendo music playing in the background. Follow us. It's a good time to be a baseball fan. We appreciate Nick in the chat talking all about baseball and kind of commiserating his Phillies. It's going to be okay. Bird Talks Ball. Check him out as well. Devin, any final words before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, Dave Dombrowski is happy with where they are. So that money, that bag of money they were going to give Bo Bichette, they're pocketing that shit. I'll just say this on the way out here. Next year's Hall of Fame, look for Buster Posey maybe being a first ballot. The other guy that I think has a legitimate chance is John Lester. Some of the numbers might not be where you think Hall of Fame needs to be, but think about some of the teams he was a part of. 2007 Red Sox, those Cubs broke the curse. I just think he had big enough moments. Those are the only two that caught my eye on next year's candidates. And obviously some of the guys that are already on the ballot may make their way up and eventually get in. But thanks for listening, guys. Check out the next one. And yes, follow us.
Yeah, check us out. We'll be back just in a little bit talking all things baseball. As always, we'll talk to you after a while. And until that time, happy baseball.
In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye, Mattingly. My voice was deep field down the line.